You're listening to Knowledge at Wharton on Business Radio, Cirius XM 111. Here again is Dan Loney.
Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Knowledge at Wharton here on Cirius XM 111, Business Radio powered by the Wharton School. Thanks for spending part of your day with us on this Monday, May the 21st, coming to you from sunny Philadelphia. Coming up here in hour number 2, we're going to talk about the Farm Bill. It is always a vital piece of legislation towards supporting our nation's farmers, but also involves the food stamp program as well. And the reauthorization of the bill is fighting a battle in Congress right now with immigration as part of the backdrop. We'll explain how and why coming up in just a minute. And then in our final 30 today, the U.S. birth rate hit a 30-year low last year. We'll discuss what this means in a variety of sectors, including the future for the economy of this country. All of that in hour number 2 of our show. The way for you to join in is either by phone at 844-WHARTON, 844-942-7866. Or if you can't get to your phone, you can send us a comment via Twitter, either at BizRadio111, B-I-Z Radio 111, or you can use my Twitter account, which is at Dan Loney, Loney 21. First, though, our number of the day, and our number of the day today is $250. We all know how important that our smartphones are these days, and of course, we've seen many people connected more and more to their friends, to their families, but also to their bosses because of the ease of texting or shooting off an email. Well, now a New York City politician is bringing forth a bill to fine employers who require employees to answer calls or messages at all hours of the night. It is called the Right to Disconnect Bill, brought forward by New York City Councilman Rafael Espinal. Companies with 10 employees would have to provide notice that they don't have to respond to those late-night messages. Someone fired or not responding could actually receive $2,500 and possibly get their job back. $250, our number of the day. I actually think that's, as much contact as you get with your bosses or your coworkers. That's not the worst thing in the world. That's our number of the day. The United States House of Representatives rejected a new version of the Farm Bill recently after negotiating with several key members of the House failed to get the deal that they were looking for. They were hoping to get a future vote on immigration as well as concessions on spending, which means the $867 billion bill, which always has a significant impact in a variety of areas for farmers, has been tabled for the moment. Steffen Schmidt is professor of political science at Iowa State University. He joins us on the phone right now, as does Joe Glauber, who is a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute, and he's also a former chief economist at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Steffen, Joe, great to have you both with us. Thank you both.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Joe, I mentioned how important this bill is to farmers. Take us inside what you've seen as the benefits for the farming sector in years past.
Well, I mean, these programs date back to the 1930s for the most part. The current Farm Bill that was passed in 2014 expires at the end of this year, essentially. And so Congress needs to reauthorize it, or through a quirk of the current legislation, all the farm programs would revert back to farm programs that were in place in the 1940s, which just would be pretty much unworkable. But it's a stick that hangs over the head of Congress to make sure they get something, that they do something for Congress, or for the farmers. But these bills have provided a lot of income support over the last several years to farmers, and we're talking on the order of $15 to $20 billion annually. So it's there's a lot of interest, obviously, among farmers.
Steffen, your reaction to at least the early defeat of this bill, and obviously, as I mentioned, the factor that immigration and a potential vote on immigration is playing a role in this.
Oh, that's right. And let me read you a really short thing that says the startling failure of the Farm Bill reflects the declining clout of the farm lobby. And it also says that the Speaker's failure to rally enough Republican support and Democratic opposition basically was the reason why the Farm Bill failed. But that's from 2013, and the Speaker was John Boehner. So the point is, the Farm Bill has always had a rough road to get through, and eventually it gets through with all kinds of negotiations going on. And so, to me at least, it's not surprising that this year we're back again where we usually are, with the Farm Bill essentially being held hostage to a bunch of other things. It's different things in every 5 years, but it's always something that you want to try to leverage the Farm Bill on.
And that obviously, Joe, for the farmers out there, that's the disappointing aspect of this, is that, you expect something to be done, and I think this is going to be another one of these instances that it may take us till, after the elections in November, but we will get something done on this, because I think in the end, Congress realizes that this is one of those programs that they cannot just kind of let pass the end of the year.
Well, they can't because of these arcane provisions that would revert it back to the 40s. Typically, what will happen, and I would agree with Steffen over this, is that what will happen is Congress at the end of the year will realize if they aren't able to come together on a large package, they'll just renew the current Farm Bill, the 2014 Farm Bill, for another year, and that's happened over the last Farm Bill that was passed in 2014 actually was supposed to be the 2012 Farm Bill, but it was extended a couple of years to exactly in this manner. And so I think that the pressures will be on Congress to do something. But, frankly, these Farm Bills, have been going on for a long, long time, and one wonders why we're continuing to spend a lot of money on the Farm Bill portion of this. But the interesting thing, of course, is the big dispute is over the food and nutrition portion of the so-called Farm Bill, which is some $70 billion annually, and those are the House is seeking, or the House leadership is seeking big changes in the so-called Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program this year.
Right, and that's the food stamps, or the SNAP program,
right.
and obviously for a lot of people, that's still a very important program, but as you alluded to, it has taken its fair share of hits in recent past.
Yeah, I think there's a certain irony. The 2014 Farm Bill, we had a big debate over in the SNAP program about categorical eligibility and whether or not some poor family would qualify for food stamps by virtue of the fact they were in another poverty program. And so Congress passed some laws that said, no, you got to means test these guys. Means test is required in the for food stamps, but under the old law, you could actually qualify if you were already pre-qualified for another program. And now with the change that said, okay, well, we don't want that. We want to make sure that everyone qualifies for means testing. So you're talking about a family of four, which may be $25,000, and you want to make sure that the ones earning $26,000 don't make it. So big debate over all of this. It saves some $5 billion in the 2014 Farm Bill, a big deal, except for when the fact you look at the same time they were debating whether or not to means test farmers at $900,000 household income. I mean, it baffles baffles me why we don't seem to see the bigger picture here. But
right, Steffen?
Well, the other argument is that essentially the Farm Bill only benefits a small number of commodities. And a lot of the new foods that Americans like, fresh vegetables and fresh fruit and other things, they really don't benefit much. And so you've got, corn, beans, cotton, sugar, and I can't remember one more, I think, there. That the question is, why doesn't the Farm Bill essentially encourage a more comprehensive success for farming. And the other argument is that all of these other products that are the result of agriculture actually can make it on their own without price supports, without all of the supports that come from the USDA through the Farm Bill. And some would argue that corn, beans, wheat, cotton, sugar should make it on their own, and that therefore, to some extent, the programs that are so expensive are in a sense unfair, but also kind of obsolete.
Does the program in general, Steffen, in your mind, need to be looked at on a variety of different aspects to see how it can be run better, managed better, or, as we move into the future?
Well, I think what Joe was talking about certainly suggests that.
Yeah.
The problem is the bureaucracy. I mean, you have the Iron Triangle, right? You have the congressional committees, you have the commodity groups, and you have essentially three different sectors that are all interacting with each other, and all have an interest in preserving what is there because it's revolutionary to try and essentially revamp something like that. So politically, it becomes really dicey. The only possibility is that as agriculture essentially shrinks in terms of the number of people that are directly involved in it, and congressional districts that are primarily agricultural decline in numbers, the politics of it becomes, I think, more brutal, because now you have urban districts and places where there are a lot of people who actually are beneficiaries of the food support programs begin perhaps going down the road to become less interested in log rolling and passing bills that essentially put so much money into an industry that might be able to make it on its own. And so I think this year immigration has come to intercept the football of this thing, and immigration is such a toxic and explosive subject that no wonder things are sort of nasty right now. If you watch the debate and the vote, it was a brutal negotiation over which rules in the House would apply and why you stopped, the vote before it could actually take place. Mm-hmm. It was one of the nastier debates that I've ever seen.
Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And look, when these programs were passed in the 30s, they were seen as transition programs, temporary programs for basically because rural households, particularly farm households, they were earning about 30 to 40% of what non-farm households were earning at the time.
Right,
and so
right.
The sector was way behind the rest of the world. If you look at the statistics collected by USDA and you look at household income for farm households now, they're 20, 30% higher than non-farm households. And so, again, reasons back to what Steffen alluded to, why we aren't having that debate, I think is a bigger question in my mind.
Why do you think we're not at this point? Because you would think that would seemingly be something that probably could ease a lot of tensions, wouldn't it not?
Well, I think part of it is the political economy of this, that we do have a small number of people who are very big beneficiaries,
yeah.
and in terms of tax dollars, 20 billion, 15, 20 billion sounds like a lot of money,
yeah.
And it is, but if it's spread about, it's a small percent of GDP, it's a small percent of a lot of things, and I think that these things just get passed, and if you were to go to a committee hearing meeting, you would think the end is coming, or for the sector. And it's, as Steffen said, remember that most livestock producers, poultry producers, they're outside of the system. They're not earning government payments. Fruit and vegetable producers, there are some smaller programs for them, but they're not really. This really is going to a small number of producers. And again, if I were one of those producers, sure, I'd want to hang on to it, and I don't begrudge them for that. But I think that the debate should be there, and people really question why we continue to do this. Because if you look at the overall farm income, these payments are actually a small part of their income. I mean, you go to an Iowa corn farmer or soybean farmer, they are selling all over the world. They are competitive with producers all over the world, and farm program payments are a pretty small part of their overall income.
Well, and because of the fact that they are selling across the globe, whatever that percentage is that they are paying out, they're seemingly, I would guess, more than willing to be able to do that. Correct, Joe?
Yeah. No, I think they're. I mean, they are forward-looking. They are, they are savvy business people, and farming is a tough occupation in the sense that you are subject to vagaries of weather and other sorts of things. But there are ways to protect that in the market, and the successful farmers do so.
But doesn't go ahead, Steffen.
No, Dan. One of the things that has come up this year, which is even in Iowa, which is a very prosperous state, very low unemployment, great land, great farmers. The suicide rate of farmers. The suicide rate of farmers is explosive, and there is a huge concern about the stress of farming, about the national environment of tariffs and trade wars and NAFTA, being on a precarious plank right there. And so there is sympathy, I think, from people who normally wouldn't be sympathetic to support programs, and there is an effort to provide through the Farm Bill assistance to farmers that would be counseling and other things like that. So that's something that, even during the farm crisis, when, a lot of the farms around my farm in Iowa basically went kaput and were bought up by their neighbors, there were suicides then. There was not that much of a discussion about essentially exactly what Joe was talking about, which is farming is stressful. You got to watch out for all kinds of things that are coming at you.
Well, and I think that's part of Steffen, the reason why you need to discuss this and get this done as quickly as possible, because I think we normally assume that farming is farming, but there are so many other aspects to this that the Farm Bill includes. You mentioned obviously the concern about the health of these individuals, but I guess they do a lot of the scientific work as well in terms of how to improve farming and things that can be looked at in the future as well.
Yeah, and the inputs, are becoming incredibly sophisticated. We're talking, about genetically engineered crops, and we're talking about the herbicides, that can only be used on a certain crop, and the growth of very large industrial companies that are essentially providing farmers with the inputs that they need at huge cost. This year, I've heard some of my neighbors say that they're probably not going to really make anything on each acre that they plant of beans and corn because the prices have been soft. The international environment is extremely high risk and uncertain, and the cost of these sophisticated inputs as well as equipment. You go to a farm now, my neighbor has tractors that run on GPS. Pretty soon they're going to be autonomous. They're going to be going and preparing the fields, planting seeds, doing the spraying and keeping the crop alive, and then harvesting practically without anyone in the cabin of their equipment. And that is another expensive future for agriculture.
Joe, obviously we're talking about this from the federal perspective with the Farm Bill, but how much of this also could potentially be addressed at the state level? And again, I know budgets are tight, but is this something that in part could be looked at the state level, because I would think virtually every state in the country has farming of some kind in it right now?
Yeah, but it typically isn't. You may see a state offer a small program, but I don't think this is something the states would want to take on at all. Okay. In terms of providing support in quite that way. I think this is. I just look at this and see this big, broad group of farm programs and other sorts of things, and I think they just need to be looked at and evaluated and see, do we really need this? One thing the government has done for a long time is had public research dollars. Those dollars have been tremendously successful in terms of increasing productivity, and unfortunately those have actually declined in real terms if we look at those over the last several years. And you wonder, when we're talking of a research budget on the order of $2 to $3 billion, why we're were arguing to spend $20 billion when on price and income support programs, when a handful of those dollars would probably go a lot further in terms of increasing productivity and helping those in agriculture.
Steffen?
Yeah, the other thing that's come along and is gaining a tremendous amount of momentum, I think, is the effects of modern agriculture, especially on water systems. I mean, in Iowa, we've had a tremendous problem. Almost every waterway in Iowa, ponds, lakes, streams, rivers, are heavily contaminated with nitrates. The city of Des Moines is spending millions of dollars to try and clean out the water supply that comes from the runoff of fields in the Raccoon River and Skunk Rivers and so on. And there are lawsuits that are now being launched against counties and against farmers for contributing to this. And that is becoming a debate that a lot of the farm sector, we're talking about farmers, are very concerned about, because the costs of mitigating that are piled on all of the other costs that farmers are incurring, as well as regulations, other regulations from the EPA, which is why agriculture tends to be not a big fan of the EPA. Declaring a small wet area in a field that is wet when it rains really hard, a wetland, and therefore a set-aside where you can't farm. Those things all create another level of debate and tension and support for certain national policies. And I think Trump did very well in farm country, in part because of his efforts to deregulate a lot of things.
Joe?
Yeah, I would agree with that. People point to farmers as being, generally associate them with having been very, very supportive of the president in the election. And the irony, of course, is on trade. Trade's very important to agriculture. I think on the trade front, there's been a lot of uncertainty, and we've seen a little bit of break here with these discussions this weekend with China, and hopefully not leading to a trade war like so many had feared. But the other issue is immigration, and that's one that farmers use a lot of foreign labor. They use it for fruits and vegetables. They use it for dairy. They use it for food processing, all sorts of things. And here's a case, too, where on the immigration side, at least, there's all sorts of problems for farmers. But on the third front, regulation, I would agree wholeheartedly with what Steffen said. I think farmers have viewed that they're overregulated. They view, rightly or wrongly, EPA is going too far on things like water, on endangered species, on all sorts of regulatory environment. And so I think they've been very, very happy with the administration on that. Even
Joe, if I can
there's not big changes yet.
A real quick comment. I don't know, Joe, if you have followed the reports that a lot of vegetable and fruit farmers, which is California, Florida, places, Texas, and places like that, are so frustrated with the declining availability of farm labor that some of them are actually buying land in Mexico and are selling their farms in the U.S. and moving their farm operation, or planning to move their farm operation to Mexico, which is an extraordinary thing and goes completely counter to the theme that the Trump administration has been essentially playing, which is, made in America and domestic jobs and so on. And we've seen that in the past, many Iowa farmers have bought very large tracts of land in southern Brazil and are running highly successful and less regulated farming operations out of southern Brazil. So this is a really interesting sort of side story to the whole immigration discussion.
844-942-7866, or if you'd like, send us a comment via Twitter, either at BizRadio111 or my Twitter account, which is at Dan Loney, Loney 21. Steffen Schmidt from Iowa State University, Joe Glauber from the International Food Policy Research Institute joining us on the phone right now. And I guess, Joe, because as you alluded to, and I think it's well known, that the farm industry does rely on people that come from other countries. How much are they stepping into or trying to step into this discussion on a daily basis right now?
Well, it has been a concern. I should say it's been a concern not just in this administration either. I mean,
exactly.
With all the increased security, following 9/11, the whole imposition of this so-called E-Verify system, farm labor has been scarce. There's been, certainly stories in the past of difficulties of getting crews to come in and pick at critical times, and or having spot inspections where illegals are found and disrupting either a plant, food processing plant, or fields. So there's a lot of concern on that front, and I think people have been. There's been, ironically, here with this farm bill, we had, some interest in immigration reform. Part of that was actually to have a temporary farm labor program, which I think is depending on where in the country you are, there's been support for that. People in the West want a more comprehensive reform, and in the East, you tend to bring in people for a very short period of time or whatever. But these are very big issues, and farm labor is a very important component, particularly for certain types of agricultural production.
Steffen?
Yeah, I mean, in Iowa, the row crop production, beans and corn, hardly uses any labor anymore. It's all mechanized now. My kids used to walk soybeans. They used to rogue. They used to detassel corn and stuff. Nothing. You don't see a single person in the farm fields anymore. It's all mechanical. And in part, it's cost saving, and those chemicals that you spray when you're sitting on a bean bar and are spraying weeds going down a field are not very good for you. And I think there were concerns about lawsuits and things like that. So that part of agriculture, I think, is much less dependent now on farm labor. But there's the other one, of course, which Joe talked about, which is, fruit and vegetable farms, and as well as the interconnection between, for example, the packing plants in Iowa, which we call them packing plants. They're actually slaughterhouses.
Right.
They still rely very heavily on labor, and their wages have declined to the point where native Iowans, let's call them that, just don't want to take those jobs anymore because they are dangerous and not very pleasant jobs, and they've depended a great deal on immigrants. In Iowa, it's been immigrants from Vietnam and Sudan and other places, and now with the raids on those plants by ICE, that has impacted the production facilities, the hog and chicken, turkey, egg, and cattle production, which are all huge in Iowa. So there is an interconnection, I think, between producers of some of those products and immigration, even if they don't use a lot of farm labor themselves, but the processing system uses it. So
right.
We'll see how that rolls out, because I haven't seen, frankly, when you asked the question, Dan, a whole lot of pressure from those industries on Congress and on the administration to basically tone down what has become really a very shrill anti-immigrant theme, even if you're a legal immigrant or here on a permit to work, and that is causing a lot of trouble.
Great having you both with us. Thank you, Steffen. Thank you, Joe. All the best.
Thanks.
Thank you. Steffen Schmidt from Iowa State University, Joe Glauber from the International Food Policy Research Institute, and a former chief economist at the Department of Agriculture. We'll take a break. Our final 30 coming up in just a minute. After the break, why the U.S. birth rate is at a 30-year